Today I'm going to be starting off with the development section here. So from the previous video we got through this second time bar with this illusion of speeding up on those triplets and then semiquavers. And we're going to continue from there into this sort of dreamy feel here where we've got these on the beat notes underneath and this kind of sweet, gradually crescendoing pattern in the right hand of the piano. So the first thing that we get that kind of gives us any disruption here is going to be in the cello part. We're going to have some different rhythms here, so it might be helpful to annotate where the beats are falling or to separate out the individual beats here. That we've definitely got some kind of 3 versus 4 conflict here. So we don't have a note on the first part of this triplet here, but these triplets are going to be perfectly in line with those sets of 4 semiquaver. So this does give us a bit of a more majestic feel in this point as well. It's just getting into a beginning of breaking out the different rhythms there. So this is going to go in dialogue between the cello part and, as you can see, the violin part that's obviously going to be a couple of octaves higher at that point, but it's the same pattern that's going to resurface between each time when it replies to the other part. So this development doesn't latch on to the first theme that we had at the beginning of the exposition, but it does bring in that idea of the triplets, and it really, I would suggest, links in with the third theme where we had quavers and then long notes alternating between the cello and the violin. So perhaps compare this just with the beginning of the third theme, which would have been bar 83 or 84. So not that far back to check back and look at that. So what's happening here with the harmony? We are still looking at a lot of B flat. We've got the dominant of B flat with the F here, and B flats coming along up here too. This chord is a little bit different. We've got the D down below, but it's still forming that B flat chord, so we could put that in a first inversion. And the harmony is quite straightforward as we move through this section. As we get a little bit further on, we've got some more inversions. This bit here, for example, could be a second inversion of the fourth chord, subdominant chord. A lot of times when we have those inversions, we then see the root position ones as well. Here we've got the E in the bass. Same chord is coming along here now with the G in the bass. So we have some movement in terms of inversions. We don't have a lot of movement straight away in terms of the chords that are being chosen. And we start to have some non-chord tones, or non-key tones, should I say, within here as well. So the first one that really stands out is this A natural in this bar. So this, I would suggest, is a supertonic 7th chord in the first inversion. So supertonic, of course, in B flat is going to be C. Which makes me change my mind about this chord here. So what I'm thinking, or what I think, where I think the idea came from, is actually the next notes in this sequence here. We've got the C, E flat, G flat, and then here we've got the B flat as well. So this is where my idea of the supertonic came, but I got ahead of myself and looked at that A natural in there as well. So this one doesn't really fit with the chords overall on this beat, and in fact we want a different inversion here too, because it's the B flat that is in the bass, the D there. So this feels like maybe it should go to an F. That doesn't happen straight away. We've got a bit of a prolonged situation with this, adding in that dissonance of that A natural as well, that kind of fits right between the G flat and the B flat. It's an unusual note to have in there, but it's going to create a little bit of bounce onto those G flats each time it comes round. So as we go a little bit further, this doesn't seem to get resolved straight away. We've got something that looks like a diminished seventh coming up. Bear in mind that we're still coming from this B flat key. Over here we've got the A flat, sorry, the G flat, B flat, E flat, G flat. This is likely, I could say, is a first inversion on the E flat, but it's got the G flat, so this is not in the key of B flat. This is an E minor chord. If we look at the other chords that are around here as well, we've kind of got it's a little bit weird. There's a lot of close chords and a lot of notes that seem like they don't fit together very well. And again, we've got this system here with the C, E flat, G flat being mixed in with the A. It seems like that A is kind of a passing note of some description. It's not usually an A that happens in the rest of the chord below either. So here again, we've got that E flat, and I am getting way ahead of myself and need to put the flat in with the E flat and the B flat kind of giving us something there. We've got the B flat also coming in the cello. One thing that I sometimes would have forgotten to do with this is to notice the cello line as well, which is often giving us a note either that's lower than the piano note or a held note like this that is going to give us some clues about what's going on. So it does seem like unusual chord voicing during this point, but it does eventually come back to the B flat. So we've got a bit more clarity at this point where we've got the B flat, the D. We don't have an F right away, but it does fit with that B flat chord here. What we definitely have over here is some auxiliary notes where we get underneath each chord tone here. So this is kind of transitional. We've got the fragment mainly in the strings, which I haven't commented too much on, but we've got this sort of dialogue going on with the strings, and we're building back in towards a restatement of the first theme. So the first theme's restatement comes here in the tenor clef for the cello. And again, we're getting some dialogue between those string parts. So this is really the point where we get that restatement of the first theme, probably going to give us the idea that that is the thing to be developed at this point. So look underneath as well. We've got this sort of buoyant pattern here as well with the octaves and then the seconds bouncing through those triplets as we go down. This starts a little bit before the main theme comes back in, which kind of sets a rhythm and sets a pace for that section. So let's see what happens with the theme. Straight away we've got this section here where the strings are kind of playing parallel to each other and pretty low in the violin's range as well. So notice that that happens at quite a few places throughout this piece, that the violin plays pretty low in its range. It's going to have that nice warm tone to it that comes with those lower notes. But the cello, in contrast to that, of course, is playing quite high in its range. So here we've got the A flat and we've got the C. This A flat is going to be the A flat above the middle C. So be careful of your tenor clef. Of course, if you're not used to reading that clef, we're going to C, E, G on the ledger line. A flat is going to be above your middle C. So actually the cello is interesting here because it's playing up on the A flat above. So it might look like they're in thirds, but it's the other way around. The cello is a sixth above the violin at this particular point. So that seems strange, doesn't it? It's kind of giving us an overlap almost in the parts. Usually you would expect the cello, of course, to be playing lower than the violin. That's not the case here, and that's going to affect their tone, the way that they sound as well. But they're following more or less the same pathway through here, filling in nice intervals to support each other as they go down. But we see that theme fragment come back again to start off a next phrase here as well. So some people would argue here as well that we do have a bit of a pedal point with this B flat that keeps recurring here. And it's also likely that we could be heading into E flat at this point rather than B flat. If you notice, we've got quite a few of those A flat notes coming in. That could signal that we're getting into E flat instead. So that would sort of place us somewhere for this bar here where we've got the E flat. Is this then going to be the tonic of E flat? So it might be useful to compare back with the first part of that theme. Well, the theme is done in the same way, isn't it, in the string parts as it is here, but of course the piano part is changed slightly just to bring in that E flat, and then it continues on the same way. So be careful about where that modulation actually could happen. Of course, we've got the A naturals coming along here. It could just be that there's a brief E flat section in bar 109 and 110. So this is going to continue again. We've got that sort of restatement of the development that we had before with the cello and the violin playing those longer notes. We have a little bit of a weird chord coming up in this section, which actually we had before as well. But we've got quite the interval between the E down here and the A flat here. That's going to be a diminished fourth. So again, it's useful to look out for places where these unusual intervals pop up. It is a compound diminished fourth, of course, but kind of an unusual interval for that place. This could also make us an augmented chord if we rearrange all of these notes here. We've got the A flat the C from the violin, and the E natural. That's going to give us an augmented chord. So not only is it an unusual interval, of course, it's also an unusual chord that's coming in here. And especially we've got that B flat is potentially going to be a pedal note, as we've got it all the way through there as well. So after this, we've got more development. So we had that original theme and then the kind of longer sequence that came after that. But here we've got an element of that 4-note theme, but it doesn't have 4 notes in it. And it starts, of course, the beat before the bar. So the rhythm is going to be kind of off from what it was previously. We're going to have these sequences of 3 notes that do really give you a feel of that original theme, but as a listener you can tell that something different is happening. Notice as well, of course, that this overlaps. We don't only have these fragments in the strings, but it overlaps in the piano part as well. So we're never not hearing this. We have a really quick alternation. As soon as one part or 2 parts in the strings gets to their 3rd note, the piano part is already playing their 1st note, and vice versa. It's going to be a quick exchange between these two. So the rhythm in terms of emphasis is different here. Like I mentioned, it's starting on the final beat of the bar. So rather than having a strong beat at the beginning of the bar, everything is kind of shifted by a beat. And this sequence does continue on for a little while. So we're going to have the same pattern, the same type of melodic movement, but we're going to eventually start to change the pitches. We changed the pitches after the first time, but we're going to see a pattern emerging from here. So we've got the A flat starting these 2, then we're moving to F, then we're moving down to D. We're moving down by a 3rd each time. We get the B flat. Of course, this has gone up, but the B flat in general you can think is a 3rd below D. It's coming up in the violin part because the violin can't play an F sharp lower than this F sharp, but the cello part, of course, can. So you could think of that 3rd down from here going into the cello part. And again, we're going to go down by a 3rd here to the G as well. So it's a sequence that's very structured, going down the same type of interval each time. So most of this time as well, we are in E flat, but we've got these F sharps in this section as well, which is a bit unusual for E flat. This, I would argue, is a G major, very small G major section, which leads us in to the next parts here as well. As we go down, we're going to get more of the C sharp as well, which of course doesn't belong. And we're getting further into the G minor with some of those C sharps that could belong to the dominant of G minor, which of course is D. So for a while we've got these legato sets of 3 continuing, and then towards the end of this section we're going to have a disruption to that. No more of this alternating theme, but lots of these quaver notes, kind of mirroring what we had before in the violin part, ascending by 3rds there, but it's really outlining that D major chord. We've got the D, F sharp, A, D, and down below it's kind of in reverse. We've got the D, A, F sharp, D. So this is really strongly yelling out the idea of D major. Whether we're going to go into G major or minor could be a question. We might still be thinking about this as a dominant of that section from before, but it really does go into D major. So this is one of those kind of third relationship keys. Our piece started off in B flat. Right now we're in D. It's an unusual key choice, but it works out for how this piece is going to be structured. So we're going to really get some preparation coming in the piano. It's no longer going to be a dialogue with the strings, but it's getting some preparation here for its more accompaniment-based role. And straight away in the next line, we see that, the melody really is coming in cello, and the piano is not doing anything melodic at this point. It's really accompanying with its D major chords, which actually are not full D major chords. We don't have the A in here, but we're setting up that D and F sharp to continue. So are we actually landing in D major? Well, let's look at what comes next. This section here definitely focuses on D. But as we get over here, we've got the B flat in the cello, and we have down here, we have Ds and Gs. So this is a G major section here. So we could look at this as resolving in G from the dominant. And actually, if we look, we've got Ds, D, F, D, and then here we've got G, B, D. And of course, it's in second inversion. This is then going to carry on in the next bar as well. Again, we've got that 5, 1C pattern. G major, just like D major, is going to be a third relationship to that B flat that we talked about from the beginning. So this section we're really setting up from the cello, and this is borrowed again from that first theme. It's a lyrical commentary on the first theme that we had from the exposition, and eventually we get some answering dialogue from the violin. Now, this time the ranges of the strings are much more typical. We've got that bass clef section for the cello. The violin is going to have its higher register. So this is going to bring back again some elements of the kind of rising and falling pattern here, but the piano is not joining in with that. But very quickly it turns into something that's a bit unexpected. Now this is an area from bar 143 that has been described previously as ghostly or having some kind of underworld character. So it might be useful to think of where that comes from, particularly listen to this in contrast to the other sections. All of a sudden, we've got pizzicato, which is going to give us a different sense of the tone quality and the structure, the sound of the piece. We've got quite a few major seconds coming in here. Minor seconds even as well, major and minor seconds. And where these pieces seem like very different fragments to what we've had previously, very quickly we also get the trills in the piano part, which is going to add to this overall feeling at this particular time. Dynamics are important as well. Suddenly we're very quiet in the dynamics, very soft. we've got sort of a contrast then between something that's soft, pizzicato, which feels kind of edgy, and we've got lots of overlapping sections. So even in the piano section, for example, I would imagine this is quite tricky to do. You've got the trill in one hand and then the trill in the other hand whilst you're not doing the trill in both hands. So a lot of swapping over, overlapping there, quickly turning to playing in the same style, same rhythm rather, and dialogue then continuing between the strings, still pizzicato at that point. At this point, the entries are interesting as well. Like we had before, the descending third pattern. Here we don't have a third pattern, but we do have some fifths, which is useful, and some seconds. So straight away at the beginning, we're starting both instruments off with their B natural in this part. But we are having a lot of falls at the end which differ. So here we've got a second, but in the violin part, we've got a fifth. See if that pattern continues as we go further along this section. Well, first thing to notice is the starting note. The starting note is now a C for both parts, so that's going up by a tone so far. Does that continue? It does. We've got this D for the next entry and the E in the cello part for the next entry, although the violin's breaking out of its pattern now and going down to the G. But those intervals at the end do continue to change. So here it goes over the line, of course. We've got a second again, but in the violin part, we have a fifth. This time it's a diminished fifth. This one, again, second for the cello part, and then a huge leap down for the violin. So even though they're sort of playing the same things, they're not ending them the same way each time. So that's useful to note that it's not an exact sequence or an imitation between those parts. They are doing something different each time. After that, we've very much got a transition. So the violins leaped down to join the cello at a closer range. They're now only a third apart here. And we've got this ascending quaver pattern, which is then taken on by the piano as well. So this again could be quite difficult to play, but it's useful. It's going to keep giving that sense of ascending intensity between the different sets of instruments here. That's kind of a traditional or transitional section, increasing those levels of intensity as we go. So as we go, this kind of continues for a while like a transition, and we've got more of this conversational fragment here. Notice that it's different now though. We don't have an overlap where one part is starting on the last beat of the previous part. We've actually got these rests in between each fragment. And the piano is not joining into that dialogue here. It's doing something different. It's going to give its own sense there of what's happening. So it's going to lead us into something else unusual. Here where we've got the trills, the harmony is going to feel unusual because of those trills. But this is really leading us towards the end of that development section. So this is a little stasis section before we get into the recapitulation. So the recapitulation is going to be the next video, but notice that we've really ended on much more of a polyphonic section here. We've come into those trills from all of this conversation and different type of stuff going on, even though sometimes the piano is it has a mirror of, or it has the octave above in this case, that fragment. These trills are really interrupting that and giving us a sense that something else is happening.